ESM Go, Minister Chan, Middle East Institute Chairman Bilahari Corsican, Professor Eng Seng Ho, members of the diplomatic community, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Middle East Institute's 8th annual conference entitled The Middle East Pivot, China's BRI between Geostrategy and Commercial Opportunity. May I now invite the director of the Middle East Institute, Professor Eng Seng Ho, to kick off this morning's proceedings with his welcome address.
Emeritus Senior Minister Goh Chok Tong, Minister Chan Chun Sing, distinguished speakers and honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. It is my honor and great pleasure to welcome you to the Middle East Institute's annual conference. The mission of the Institute is to understand and to foster relations between Asia and the Middle East, which is also known as West Asia. We in Singapore and Southeast Asia have been profoundly shaped by relations between West Asia and East Asia. We also have a role, an opportunity to play a role in their revitalization, which will surely grow in the coming years. The agenda for our conference this year is to think about how China's Belt and Road Initiative can engage the Middle East and what that engagement means for a place like Singapore. Now, when Europe went to China, it passed through the Islamic lands and islands from Morocco to Mindanao. That history is also known as the history of colonialism. The question now is, as China moves west in the reverse direction, will China do things differently? For us in Singapore, which sits with the Islamic islands, shares their colonial history, and is familiar with both the West and China, what role can Singapore play in this new chapter of an old story? A stark contrast between East and West Asia marks our starting point in this new chapter. In the past 40 years, East Asia has been at peace, kept its head close to the factory floor, and been growing at 6 to 12% per year for 3 decades. West Asia, on the other hand, has been mired in one war or another in that same period up to today. It is no surprise, therefore, that East Asians look to West Asia with some trepidation. At the same time, we know that within adversity lies opportunity. The starting point of this phase of Asia's growth was marked by war rather than peace. Borders between various East Asian countries till today are lines of truce rather than products of permanent peace treaties. The conflicts that drove their fights were not so much solved as ignored and bracketed off, as they became dependent on one another through supply chains snaking around across Asia and across the Pacific to America. China, East Asia, Southeast Asia fell into a flying geese formation with the United States as lead goose. As the US kept climbing the value chain, it shared older technology with its lower cost-based Asian partners and bought their products. So factories moved from the US to Asia, from Japan to Taiwan, Taiwan to China, China to Vietnam, and even to Africa. China and the US, through this process, became locked in what I call a mutual addiction. The US enjoyed low-cost Chinese manufacturers. Chinese financing helped to cover their savings trade deficits. China, on the other hand, enjoyed access to the huge US market, a deep bond market to put their financial surpluses in, built up its manufacturing prowess, and lifted over 700 million people out of poverty. That mutual addiction stands at a crossroads today, as the US's lead goose position looks like it may be challenged by China. The headwinds faced by Huawei today, having overtaken Cisco as a leader in internet infrastructure technology, gives us a taste of why and how attempts are now being made to unwind that mutual addiction. Now, China's BRI can be seen in this light. To wean itself off the US as an investment destination for financial surplus, market for manufacturers, source of high tech. Under the BRI umbrella, China is building roads, railroads, ports, power stations, factories away from the Pacific in the other direction, across Asia to West Asia, Africa, South and Eastern Europe. In doing so, China hopes to spur industrialization and incomes along the route, garner expanded markets for its higher value-add products. Its surplus finance and capacity in infrastructure building will provide the public goods that enable countries along the way to access the world market, industrialize, diversify, climb the value chain, and increase incomes. Now, this framework for thinking about the BRI allows us to think about where and how China can engage the Middle East. And it has led us to look for experts who can shed light on those points of engagement. Now, in the fundamental dimension of geography, the Middle East sits at the junction of Asia, Africa, and Europe. The Gulf airlines have already capitalized on this basic geographical fact to eat the lunch of Singapore Airlines, Lufthansa, and to strike fear in the hearts of US airlines. What will the building out of transportation infrastructure on land and sea look like under the BRI? As construction proceeds, how will the inevitable disputes that arise be resolved? Many of you will know that Singapore has been forging ahead as a center for legal innovation and will not be surprised to hear that a top Singaporean arbitrator, Dr. Michael Huang, has been serving as the Chief Justice of the Dubai International Financial Center. Straddling Singapore and the Middle East, Dr. Huang will share with us his thoughts on whether China can build on existing legal infrastructure between the two regions, will tweak it, or will take a different course. All of this has to be paid for, of course, and Singapore is already a leading center for loan syndication, for raising the massive sums needed for things like infrastructure financing. Questions have been raised, however, about financing from China, and it seems to me that expanding the range of financing modalities is a critical item on the BRI agenda. Now, the energy-producing Gulf countries have massive surpluses, over $1 trillion in US Treasury bonds, just like China, and they are a potential source of co-financing. Islamic financing is another potential source, which can also serve to indigenize the Chinese path through the Islamic lands by giving Muslim populations skin in the game. Multilateral financing is also being grown, and we will hear from another Singaporean bridge builder, Mr. Pang Yi-Yen, the Director General of Investment Operations at the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank based in Beijing. Now, economic relations are not built on charity or friendship, but mutual benefit. The BRI will go through the Middle East and succeed only on the basis of comparative advantage. It is a necessary condition. What are the comparative advantages of Middle Eastern countries? Location is one, oil and gas is another. We will hear from Mr. Mutlaq al Morished, who has taken the Saudi downstream pioneer SABIC into Asia. They have an office in Singapore and is passionate about the possibilities of petrochemicals. From the other side, we will also hear from Professor Wu Bingbing, Qatar Chair at Peking University, on the diversity of Middle Eastern players as seen from China. I've mentioned that the Islamic world is a big middle region that stretches between Europe and China. The Mongols created the first Belt and Road when they conquered Baghdad and built their Chinese capital in Beijing, connecting West and East Asia. The Mongols enhanced the roles of Muslim traders along the length of the Continental Road and also sparked the maritime route as well, enabling Quanzhou, or Zaytun to the Arabs, Muslims, to become the main importing port of Indian Ocean goods into China. Of course, you may know that Cheng Ho, when he went from China, Quanzhou was his jumping off point to this part of the world. So there are these historical things which give us a lot of concepts to think about these new relations. Muslim populations have since then been entangled in both the economic and geostrategic issues along the territorial and maritime routes. We have a panel on Islam, on this Islam question, with experts who know both China and Arabia, both Chinese and Arabic languages, Ms. Janice Jeong and Mr. Muhammad Asuderi. They are PhD students, and that is precisely why they are the ones who have these two languages. This is a new generation which we are building and need to build. Last but not least, we return to geostrategy in a concluding roundtable, and there we invite all of you to participate in it. Will the Middle East be pulled into rivalry between the US and China? Will the attempts to deal with their addiction to Middle East oil and gas become entangled with the attempts to cure themselves of their addiction to each other? Can the Middle East maintain a comfortable space between the two, or even help them find a soft landing? Will the Middle East be one region where they can cooperate, cognizant of the dangers posed to both? Can China and Asia provide the Middle East a new horizon of possibilities or new solutions to old intractable problems? Singaporeans are highly invested in this question and will be keen to hear how others think their way through them. Thank you for coming. A special thanks to our distinguished speakers for coming and sharing your expertise, wise insights, and worries with us. And a big hand to our Middle East events team for bringing us all together. Sharon, Jamila, Romel, Imad, Rosita, Wayne, and Kelvin. Thank you very much.